the family of Stephen Green, who led the campaign against Jerry Springer the Opera. Stephen Green's also actually one of the people that the Tufton Street AstroTurf pressure group Restore Trust have tried to put onto the board of the National Trust because they think it's got too woke. And he's a man who believes it's not possible for a man to rape his wife. Anyway, I was doing a gig on this tour and his daughter came up at the end and introduced herself. And it was one of the most overwhelming things that has happened to me.
Wow, it's making you a bit emotional thinking about it.
Yeah, it was, because, you know, we put years of work into that show, and at the point where it should have settled into a viable thing, it was stopped, largely by him. And it was so great to see her, and I was really not for six by it, and I thought it was very brave of her to come and say hello. So, yeah, it was great.
You appreciated it.
Yeah.
What would the issue for them was that Jesus is depicted in a cheeky way
Well, he wasn't really. I mean,
I remember seeing it. He's wearing a nappy.
Well, he wasn't wearing a nappy. He's wearing a
lungi.
In the first half, okay, basically, my contribution to the opera was to copy the plot of The Wizard of Oz, whereby, if you remember, in The Wizard of Oz, all the people that Dorothy meets in her everyday life re-emerge as fantasy caricatures of themselves.
That's right.
In the dream sequence, which is the journey to Oz.
That's right.
So all the people that Jerry Springer met in the first half re-emerge in the second half in the fever dream that he has in the moment between being shot and dying. They re-emerge as analogous religious figures whose stories in the first half, that the squabbling couple come back as Adam and Eve, the sort of father figure, bigamist bloke comes back as God. The man who in the first half was wearing a nappy because he was a coprophiliac comes back as Jesus in a loincloth, like Jesus wears in all the paintings of Jesus. He is specifically not in a nappy. It's like a nappy, and that's why he thinks of it, because he's in a nappy in the first half. And Jesus, the most famous images of Jesus are all those like crucifixion paintings where he's in a loincloth. So that's why that was that. And it wasn't a nappy, it was a loincloth. But the story became that it was a nappy. But also with Stephen Green, there was a very specific agenda, which is that you wouldn't have done this about another religion, specifically Islam. And actually you wouldn't have done. Now, the reason I wouldn't have done it about Islam was that you wanted something that was commonly understood, right? And in the West, whether it's Milton or Nick Cave, a commonly understood trope is the Christian religion. It's a commonly understood thing where you can use elements of those stories to tell a story. Islam's not commonly understood. Of course, what became immediately clear sometime later is another reason you wouldn't have done it about Islam is because some supporters of that religion would have taken violent retribution on any representation of it. Although I think the South Park depiction of Muhammad is still knocking about somewhere, but they had the people surrounding Christian Voice had a whole ragbag of things. They were homophobic.
That was Stephen Green's outfit.
Yeah,
Christian
they
Voice?
were.
Is he still knocking around?
Well, he is. I mean, Tufton Street tried to get him on the board of the National Trust 3 years ago, so he's still knocking around. The Daily Mail always used to reel him out for a quote, and they stopped. I think he got a bit too hot for them, you know.
So when it showed on BBC, right?
Yeah, that was what caused all the trouble, really.
It was the most complained about transmission in history?
Yeah, but again, it's kind of meaningless.
That's quite a
because
feather in the
it's sort of
cap.
meaningless though, because the internet was starting, so it was easy to mobilise complaints, and most of the people that complained about it wouldn't have seen it. So it's kind of,
it was 50,000.
I think it was 60,000.
It almost felt imitative. Like at the time, it was a bit like, well, if radical Islam can go around mixing things up, intimidating people, we're gonna we're gonna show them what we can do.
That's what Stephen Green said. He said, "The Muslims have stolen a march on us." He said that was his quote. He felt that in the economy of offence, they were being outperformed by
Was
other
that the
religions.
phrase he used?
Yeah, the Muslims have stolen a march on
not
us.
the economy of offence.
No, I
it
just
was
made
like
that up.
that. It's like, well, why can they do cartoons of Jesus?
Yeah. Well, I think it's different. It's because it is slightly different because there's not a tradition of depicting Muhammad as I understand it, and also even within the Christian faith, if you think of the mystery plays from the Middle Ages, there were fairly robust depictions of Christian religious figures in those that were used to do social satire about contemporary issues of the time. So I think they've always been kind of quite flexible to us as artists and writers in Christian cultures. We've always been able to play a little bit fast and loose with them, to tell other sorts of stories. But they're not that useful anymore, unfortunately, because most people don't really know anything about the Christian religion anymore. And there are some good things about that. You can't necessarily use it to win a moral argument in the way it used to be enough to just say, the Bible would say, don't do that. But what it does mean is there isn't a framework for telling stories, which I think is a shame that it's gone in that way. Or for understanding. You can't understand the greats of Blake and Milton. You can't understand that without initially knowing your way around the Christian religion. You have to. So I think other things will start to fade into meaninglessness because we don't really understand that. I also think it means a lot of people are offended by things without really understanding them. I mean, Tommy Robinson is telling the Church of England they need to put the Christ back into Christmas. So it basically means the religion is misunderstood enough to be appropriated by the far right. So they're in it.
Has he? I hadn't seen that.
Put the Christ back into Christmas, yeah.